Who's next?
Who's next? Mr. Luca. Honorable senators, clerks, members of the public, allô, bonjour. My name is Philippe Luca, and I'm the founder of the Vancouver Island Compassion Society. I'm a graduate research fellow with the Centre for Addictions Research of British Columbia and a Victoria City Councillor. I'm also one of about 4,000 Canadians authorized by the federal government to use cannabis for medical purposes. My use of medical cannabis began in 1995 when I was diagnosed with hepatitis C. It turns out that as a result of an operation in Ottawa in 1982, I had become a victim of Canada's tainted blood supply. Medical cannabis alleviates the nausea, loss of appetite, and localized pain that often accompany hepatitis C. However, finding a safe and consistent supply has been a challenge for so many Canadians. So in 1999, I left a career in education as a high school teacher to open the Vancouver Island Compassion Society, or VICS, a nonprofit medical cannabis research, distribution, and advocacy center located in Victoria, BC. About 14 months after the VICS first opened its doors, we suffered a police raid, and I was charged with 3 counts of trafficking for the distribution of cannabis. And although the VICS reopened within 10 days' time, I spent the next 2 years in court fighting for my freedom and for the rights of sick and suffering Canadians. After hearing how the VICS had positively impacted the lives of its members, Provincial Judge Higginbotham granted me an absolute discharge, praising the work that was being done at the organization and citing that, and I quote, Mr. Lucas enhanced other people's lives at minimal or no risk to society. Although he did it outside any legal framework, he provided that which the government was unable to provide, a safe, high-quality supply of marijuana to those needing it for medical purposes. End of quote. Since that happy day in the summer of 2002, the VICS has gone from a small dispensary on the western edge of Canada to an internationally recognized research center that has become the template for responsible and effective patient-centered medical cannabis access around the world. In that regard, I've had a chance to advise a number of U.S. states who on their medical marijuana program, and 18 months ago I was invited by the Ministry of Health of Israel to help them with their burgeoning medical cannabis program. Ladies and gentlemen, I share this story with you today to reflect that had this bill that you're currently considering been in effect at the time of my arrest in 2000, all of the wisdom and deliberation of Judge Higginbotham would have been for naught. And his words of praise would ultimately have meant very little, for he would have had no choice but to sentence me to a mandatory 2-year prison term. This would have affected my life and the lives of the VICS 1,000 members in numerous ways. It would have robbed my wife and I of our wedding in the summer of 2002 and of the subsequent birth of my daughter Sophie last year, would have negatively impacted my ability to pursue my master's degree at the University of Victoria, and it quite likely would have prevented my election at Victoria City Council in 2008, where my focus has been on harm reduction and ending homelessness. None of this would have been possible under Bill C-15. According to the Canadian Addiction Survey conducted by the Canadian Centre for Substance Abuse in 2004, there are over 1 million Canadians using cannabis for medical purposes, and yet just over 4,000 are currently protected from arrest and prosecution through Health Canada's marijuana and medical access regulations, a federal program that has been found unconstitutional 5 times in as many years for overly restricting legal access to medical cannabis. When coupled with an ever-increasing national arrest rate for cannabis-related offenses and the mandatory minimums proposed in C-15, we have a recipe for disaster that could impact tens of thousands of Canadian patients. In an effort to control the cost and quality of their medicine, many of Canada's medical cannabis users currently produce or share their cannabis with fellow patients. National cannabis enforcement efforts cast a wide net and will inevitably ensnare cancer patients, people living with HIV/AIDS, hepatitis C sufferers, and those affected by multiple sclerosis, epilepsy, and chronic pain who benefit from the use of cannabis, as well as the employees of compassion societies risking so much to help them. As a result of mandatory minimum sentences, judges will be powerless to prevent the incarceration of critically and chronically ill Canadians who use cannabis to relieve their suffering. In regards to diversion to drug courts, I asked this committee to consider how a person suffering from cancer or HIV/AIDS who uses medical cannabis to relieve the symptoms of their condition or the side effects of treatment could possibly benefit by being diverted into a drug court program that would specifically prohibit and subsequently punish the very use of this medicine through incarceration. Perhaps more pressingly, how does our society as a whole benefit from the perhaps unanticipated but ultimately unavoidable persecution of critically and chronically ill Canadians? I've often heard the Justice Minister defend this bill by suggesting that Canadians are supportive of laws addressing drug-related crime. However, the members of this committee would do well to remember that for the last 10 years, every national opinion poll conducted on medical cannabis shows that over 80% of Canadians support medical access to cannabis. That is true across all provinces and across all party lines. Although I have no doubt that Canadians wish to see a reduction in problematic substance use and associated crime, they deserve policies that will actually achieve this goal, and not expensive and ineffective strategies that have been proven to actually increase judicial and incarceration costs, as well as the transmission of HIV/AIDS and hepatitis C, with no associated reduction in drug-related crime, violence, or addiction. In matters of such huge importance to both public health and public safety, it is imperative that we allow evidence to trump both ideology and public opinion. And in regards to mandatory minimums, the evidence is abundantly clear. They simply don't work. Extensive research conducted on mandatory minimum sentences throughout the world show that Bill C-15 won't reduce substance use, won't reduce crime and violence, and simply won't make Canadians any safer. In fact, C-15 will debase every segment of society it touches, from the police officers saddled with the difficult job of enforcing these ineffective laws, to the judges forced to incarcerate otherwise law-abiding citizens, and to imprison critically and chronically ill Canadians and those working so hard to help them. Ladies and gentlemen of this committee, I assure you that there is no single bill that you'll consider during your term in office that has a greater potential to needlessly squander taxpayer funds, to lead to violations of both human rights and civil liberties, and to increase the spread of transmissible disease and unnecessary suffering than the bill before us today. On behalf of critically and chronically ill Canadians and those who love them, I'm here today to appeal to your logic, to ask for your compassion, and to urge you to please stop Bill C-15. Thank you very much for your time and attention and for your work on this important matter. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. And Madame Bellini.